So this was for college students. A little background. Today I met a young American who's been involved in Krishna consciousness for some time, but I met him for the first time. Somebody that Pratibhahu knows. So he asked a question and said, "When did you understand that you wanted to be initiated?" And I said it wasn't really a decision about being initiated, because I was full-time involved in the Hare Krishna movement for a year, and up to here in service, temple commander and Sankirtan leader in my first year. And Prabhupada came to visit our temple in New York, and I was running around and doing stuff, and it was time for initiation. Ran upstairs, went to the temple room, sat down, got initiated, went back, and was running around doing stuff. It was just part of being dedicated to Prabhupada. So what helped me become dedicated to Prabhupada? I said, that's the real question. And a short answer, I gave him a little medium answer, but a really short one was a sense of gratitude that there was a particular experience, but the experience was my life had been completely redirected because, like you heard Uddhava describe earlier today, Prabhupada at the age of 70 got on a boat, crossed the ocean, risked his life for unknown people like me. He didn't have to do that. Like, physicians risk their life regularly going into places where there's disease and so forth and so on. But people risk their lives for the sake of unknown people, because that's their heart. And Prabhupada's was not just a temporary, but a permanent. And my life had completely changed. I was searching, but I wasn't finding. I searched for quite some time and found broken pieces of glass instead of a jewel. And I recognized that's not a jewel. It's something else. In any case, gratitude brought me to the point where I wanted to give back. And so my reaching out to college students has been that gesture. Just giving back. And how much can you give back? It's never finished. So this is a presentation for college students in the Boston area. Because of the pandemic, students from MIT and Brandeis University and Northeastern University have regular gatherings every Thursday evening. When classes resume, it's going to be back to normal, and without going into numbers, it's a good number of students from those three universities, probably 60, 70 students total. So they had a whole menu of things that they wanted to talk about. They put it in the suggestion box, and this is the one that I drew for my Thursday evening. And so that's what this is. But it's relevant, as we were discussing. Many of the persons who we've been interacting with in the course of this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, are people who have children or grandchildren or young people that are struggling with this question. So it's that how one struggles with this question is different according to age, but it's a standard question. And this is a very different, because of the audience and the circumstance, what this weekend has been. I'm being a little spontaneous here. Just today, I'll forward the link to Premananda, but there's some devotees who I requested. They have children that are in the 10 to 13 year age range. So some children are in that range. And since they have children that age and they're asking questions, the why questions. So I said, I asked the two parents, two ladies that are, homeschooling their kids, to come up with a series of seminars of things that young people ask, like your kids, and then there's other besides your kids. So there's why God. Remember, Uddhava was, one does something because. I just heard an interview of Urmila. Urmila is an educator. She has a PhD in education, and she's an educator, children's education. She's run several schools over the period of her life. When she was 8 years old, she was born in a Jewish family. I just saw this. She asked, "Mom, why are we Jewish?" And her mom said, "Because my mother was Jewish, and her mother was Jewish, and so we're Jewish." No, that was when she was 4 years old. So people that are this age, young people, are encouraged to ask why, not just because mom did it or grandmom did it, or why do we do this? And then, they face, a wall. They don't have an answer. So it's good to ask why questions. It's good to be able to relate to people who ask why questions. So if you have some small children that are in the ages, 8 to 12, you can forward this to them. I'm sure Sri Radhika would be happy to have others look at it. But so this was for college kids, because this is something they struggle with. I mean, in their own way, they struggle with it. So the presentation is for them, but here we are, sitting in your front room here. How do I learn to be happy? So I don't know if you know what this means, but young people know what this means. There's a movie called The Matrix. I've not seen it, but I've heard about it. And part of the movie, Matrix, is somebody's asked a question and he holds out two pills, the illusion or reality pill. Which one do you want? Of course, the person says, I want the reality pill. So this is the reality pill. This is to help people that really want to know, why is life difficult? Here's the real reason why life is difficult. And how to find happiness. Here's a little pyramid or a triangle. And it's a holistic picture of who we are. First is, why is life difficult? And what's life? And who are we? So the inner triangle or pyramid is the spiritual part of our existence. And I mentioned it quickly during the discussion today. The Atma, this is not what I would say to the college kids, but I'm saying to you, to all of you. The Atma the word Atma has different meanings depending upon context. It can mean the body, it can mean the mind. More commonly, it means the soul, and it can even mean the Supreme Soul, depending upon context. So that's who we are. We're a spiritual entity, but we also have these other components, mental, intellectual, and bodily. And then inside, that little skinny guy, that's us. That's the driving force of who we are. And in order to understand why life is difficult, we have to understand who we are. There was another question when I was meeting these young people today, Western people. This same fellow said, if there's one thing that you would like people to know about Prabhupada, what would that be? One thing. And I said, who are you? Prabhupada wanted people to know who they are. Now, many people think they're the body, and other people think they're the mind, and other people think they're smart. They're very intelligent. But those are coverings, or the subtle body, gross body covers the soul, but the composite makes the holistic picture of who we are. And if we don't know who we are, then the real cause for why life is difficult is the illusory energy called Maya. And this is a nice artist's rendering of Maya. There she is, Maya Devi. And she moves through those three modes of nature, goodness, passion, ignorance, and the three deities of goodness, passion, and ignorance are shown. Down in the lower left corner is a child still within the womb, it looks like. And then there's the totality of everything. So Maya has got us covered. The illusory conception of who we're not makes life difficult. If you can remove that illusory conception, then you can find out who you are. And when you find out who you are, there's real happiness. But if you don't find out who you are, and you're ruled by the illusory conception of life, life is difficult. No, for this audience, Daivhiye gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Mam evaye prapadyante mayami tam tarantite. So this is for college kids to explain the Bhagavad Gita verse in visuals. But that the verse from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Daivi he Esha Gunamayi. Guna. Daivi he Esha Gunamayi. Mama Maya Duratyaya. It's very difficult, struggling with this lady, Maya Devi. The three modes of material nature are agents through which Maya covers living entities, body, mind, and material intelligence. And we identify with them or combinations of them as who we aren't, but we think that's who we are. And that covers who we really are. I'll just say the same thing in a different way. It is the same thing. Some time ago, maybe a year and a half ago, there was a film that was intended for a public audience. It was a high-budget film, medium-budget film, to give a description of Prabhupada's life. Hare Krishna people, something, something. I forget the title. And one section of it that I really like, I've viewed it many times, and you can make the link available to them if they haven't already seen it. It's nice. It's very, visually moving. There's a scene where Prabhupada's in a television studio, and there's an interviewer. They always sit behind a desk. There must be some reason. They sit behind a desk. He's behind a desk. Prabhupada's over here in a chair. And he said, Swamiji, you've come to America at a later stage of your life. There must be some reason and some message you came to deliver. What is that? Doors open. Prabhupada said, know yourself. The man was like, what? Know yourself? Prabhupada, know yourself. Same message. Because knowing yourself, unpack it. And the self doesn't exist separate from the Supreme Self. The self doesn't exist separate from the world in which we are. That pyramid structure where there's the body, there's the covering. And it's not who we are, but it's something that's around us, and so we deal with it. But we have to deal with it in a harmonious way with the laws of God. That's what theism means, to live in harmony with the laws of God, to be respectful to God, that which belongs to God, nature, other living beings, other life forms, and so forth. But there's something about this illusory energy that makes people run after an illusory sense of happiness, because from the Sanskrit, now I'm speaking to you differently than I speak to the college kids, but this couplet, aham and mama. Aham mameti, I, the extension of the misconception of I leads to the misconception of mind. Because mind is the covering of, or the extension of I. Like I am this body, So what's mine is what's produced from this body. So my work is mine, the fruits of my work are mine, and what the fruits of the work can acquire for me, that's mine. My home, my bank account, my stuff, my mortgage, my taxes, my bills, but that's in the category of mine. My children, my family, my relatives, my friends, I and mine. And then finding happiness by bringing the senses in contact with mine, that's what happiness is supposed to be, according to the dictates of our dear friend Maya Devi. Happiness is yehi samsparsha ja bhoga. Sparsha ja. Ja means taking birth. Sparsha means contacting the objects of the senses. The idea that happiness is contacting the senses, the sense objects with the senses, dukkha yonaya evate, doesn't bring happiness, it brings dukkha. Why is life difficult? That's the question. It's the expectation of happiness through contact with the senses, of the senses with sense objects. And it just doesn't bring happiness. Doesn't matter how you fix it. And how much and what variety, and that's not what happiness is. Why is life difficult? There's an expectation of happiness through something that dukkha yoni means the womb or place of birth. Dukkha yonaya eva te. I was expecting happiness, instead I got dukkha. That's why life is difficult. Now, in our at some request of some devotees, I've been discussing Uddhava Gita. You all know Bhagavad Gita. So there's a section of the Srimad Bhagavatam where Krishna is speaking to Uddhava, called Uddhava Gita, 11th Canto Bhagavatam. Just a little detail. Arjuna was Krishna's cousin, because Kunti and Vasudeva were brother and sister. But Vasudeva had a brother, along with a sister, and his brother's name, one of his brother's name, was Devabhaga. Devabhaga had a son, whose name was Uddhava. And Uddhava was an intimate friend. Intimate. Even more intimate, or different intimate than Arjuna. So they had a very, very affectionate relationship. And outside, it is said, outside of Vrindavan, the most elevated, learned, and tuned into Krishna's heart, personality of all of his devotees was Uddhava. And just when it was time for Krishna to depart, Krishna's in Dwaraka. I don't talk like this to the college kids. I'm sharing this with you. When Krishna was in Dwaraka, it was arranged that the Yadu dynasty would depart. And the arrangement was Samba, who was one of Krishna's sons, played a prank on the Brahmins. Vasudeva held the yajna, and the Brahmanas came, performed the yajna, and after the yajna they retired to some very quiet place. And some boys, headed by Samba, came before the Brahmanas, and Samba was dressed like a lady, only he had a lump of iron in his belly area, and he was looking down, and the other boys said, this lady is really shy, but she wants to know, is her child going to be a boy or a girl? They were spoofing on the Brahmins, and the Brahmins knew. So they cursed, said, you and your whole dynasty will be destroyed by that lump of iron under the cloth of Samba. Cursed for the whole dynasty to be destroyed by that lump of iron. So they were panic-stricken. They quickly went to Ugrasen. Ugrasen heard. He decided what to do. Consulted his ministers. They took that lump of iron and ground it into powder and threw it into the sea. Except for one piece of that lump of iron wouldn't grind. And that lump of iron was also thrown into the sea. A fish swallowed the lump of iron. A fisherman caught the fish. A hunter bought the fish. When he opened the fish, he found the lump of iron. And that lump of iron was used to make the arrow that hit Krishna's heel. But before all that happened, and the powder of iron washed to the shore, and that made the reeds by the shore of Prabhas very strong, and etc. That event hadn't happened. But the curse had happened. And Krishna is sitting. And the demigods come. This is Canto 11, Chapter 6. The demigods come, and they offer prayers to Krishna. And among their prayers, they say, we came to you when we were in great distress. The earth was overburdened with demoniac kings. You've now destroyed those demoniac kings. Mission accomplished. If you so desire, you may return to your abode, your eternal abode. And with that, they departed. Krishna is alone. And Krishna is considering, Chapter 6, Canto 11, Krishna is considering, before I depart, the Yadu dynasty should leave. Because over passage of time, as Kali Yuga comes after I depart, they will be so powerful, no one can destroy them. If they become corrupt, nothing can stop them. So they should leave. Plus, they should return because their service also has been completed. So the Satya Sankalpa Shakti, one of the powers of the Supreme Lord is, he just desires something and voila, or bhavati, it happens. He doesn't have to do anything. But so the stage was set. And then Krishna began to consider, but there's one person I should leave behind, and that's Uddhava. And there was two reasons he wanted Uddhava to remain behind. He wanted him to go to the Badrinath, where the sages of Naranarayan Rishi resided, and he wanted to carry his message to them. Because when he appeared in this world, he wanted to give his association to his devotees, but he hadn't been there. So Uddhava can go as his representative. Then he also considered, this is in the Bhagavatam, he considered he wanted Uddhava to travel for some time and give his teachings. So he wanted to impart some teachings for those two purposes. In Dwarka, Uddhava gets this inspiration, Krishna is going to leave. And he goes running, falls at his feet, sobbing, holding his feet. Krishna, please take me with you. I couldn't bear to be without you. And then comes his question, which is related to this. His question is, I want to know you and not have my attachment to the temporary obstruct my understanding you and my relationship with you, but I can't become free from it. Please help me. Now he's speaking like Arjuna, as if he's an ordinary person. He's not. But he's speaking like that for our benefit because Krishna is inspiring him to speak like that. So Krishna, among other things, there's 3 chapters, which I'm just now going to show. Krishna speaks about a discussion that took place between an Avaduta Brahmin and King Yadu. King Yadu is an ancestor of both Krishna and Uddhava because their fathers are from King Yadu, from the Yadu dynasty. So King Yadu sees an Avaduta Brahmin as he's touring, and he is astonished because this Avaduta Brahmin is very fit and young and handsome and this and that, but totally detached from the world. So he wants to know from the Brahmin, how did this come about? How did you become detached like this? And then the Avaduta Brahmin starts giving lessons. He says, I've learned from 24 gurus. There was a question about multiple gurus in our question answer session the other day. Avadutta Brahman had 24 gurus. And here's three verses from that section. You recognize the donkey and the carrot, right? It's a pretty small carrot. But, this is, to teach the lesson of detachment. The Avadutta Brahman is describing to King Yadu. A conditioned soul undergoes great trouble to obtain a little happiness after struggling in material life, which is full of hardship and hypocrisy. One may receive a little sense gratification, but this illusory pleasure in no way offsets the burden of suffering one must bear to obtain it. Now, this is one verse where he's learning from a donkey. One of his gurus is a donkey. There's other ones. There's a bird, and there's the sky, and there's wind, and a fish, and different. One of them is a prostitute. He learns from a prostitute. Different things. Here's another verse from that section, and I like someone helped with the graphics. By the way, a teenager helped with the graphics. Whoops. Having some difficulty. Well, in the image, which will soon show up, in the lower left corner is a sword, and there we go. And then that's a forest. So the sword is meant to cut down the forest of illusion, the forest of material entanglement. There's a verse in the first canto Bhagavatam that speaks the same. But here's the sloka from the same chapter, Uddhava Gita. The network of material desires is created when one falsely thinks that he can establish himself permanently in the material world. This binding network should be cut by the sword of detachment. Otherwise, one will be forced to wander in the illusory network of Maya with no understanding of liberated life on the spiritual platform. So this whole section, 3 chapters worth, it's like over and over again until I get it. Knowledge and detachment, right? Knowledge and detachment. Because without knowledge, what do you have? You have ignorance. A little sharing. Starting in 2010, I started visiting China. There's a reason why, but I started visiting China. And I really like the people in China. One of the things I really like about the people in China is their hearts are very soft. And did you have kirtan here before I came? No. I've had 15 experiences with completely new audiences that did know nothing about nothing. Like yoga studio, they don't know anything about anything. And in the course of the kirtan, at the end, one of the first persons to raise their hand is someone who says, "What just happened?" I was just listening, and tears started to come from my eyes. My whole body was trembling, and I was feeling something inside I've never felt before. What was that? Their hearts are very soft. I mean, the country is hard, but the hearts are very soft. And just the sound, another appreciation, is the sound of Krishna's name has potency. They don't know what it means. They don't know what it means. They don't know who Krishna is or anything. But the sound of Krishna's name moves the heart. If one is simple, it moves the heart. If one's not simple, then the heart doesn't move so much, but it still moves. It cleanses. Cheto darpana marjanam. The heart becomes cleansed. And with that, as ignorance is removed, then what's underneath the ignorance is knowledge. Because knowledge is of the soul. Knowledge isn't something out there that we import and put on our hard drive and now we have knowledge. That's material knowledge. But spiritual knowledge is already there. Nitya Siddha, Krishna Prema, Sadhya Kabunoi from Chaitanya Charitamrita. To speak of knowledge, Krishna Prema is already within. Or through the bhakti process, Vasudeve Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga, Prayojataha, Jani Ati Ashu, Vairagyam Jnanam Cha, Yad Ahaitukam, causelessly knowledge awakens from bhakti. So in Kirtan in China, we're not having Bhagavad Gita class, just Kirtan. And something's awakening. It's really nice. It's not just one time, because it's happened so many times. And I don't spend that much time in China. It's like, anyway, it's already there. But it's covered by attachment. So the sword of detachment, the sword of knowledge, cuts the attachment, and then you can experience stuff properly. You can experience being in this world and of the world, but as a part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, and the world is extension of Him. It's not paraphernalia for my sense enjoyment. It's meant for His service. Consciousness awakens just through sound. It works. It really works. So back to the college kids. Why is life difficult? Or your teenagers, or yourselves. Like we heard, this medical doctor saying we get stressed out too. It's difficult in our professional life. The one doctor came up after, Dr. Barai, that's his name? Dr. Barai. He said, I work a 12-hour day, even on weekends. He was describing what he did before he came to our little gathering. But, he listed the things that he's a very powerful, busy man. And how to be busy with detachment is by attachment to the Supreme, in short. Say it negatively. Without attachment to the Supreme, one will be attached to the temporary. Say it positively. By attachment to the Supreme, one can move about all the temporary and be dutiful, be compassionate, be very thoughtful, be in harmony with God, but not attached. There you find happiness. You can be very busy, very active, very productive, and very happy. Here's another it's the same chapter from Uddhava Gita. Very nice graphic here. Material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness, and freedom from such desire is the cause of the greatest happiness. Right on topic. Nice graphic. The bird that's out of the cage is happy. In the cage, bird's not so happy. A little sharing again because of my visits to China. It's just part of my blood system now. By going to China, I found a lot of people would say they're Buddhist. And I realized they don't really know what Buddhism is. They just say they're Buddhist because my grandmother was Buddhist or something. I don't know. So I started learning about what Buddhism says, in a more serious way than I did before I was visiting China. And here's some building blocks. In Buddha's teaching, real simple. The root cause of suffering is desire. Root cause of suffering is desire. You want to become happy? Become free from desire. How do you become free from desire? You ready? According to Buddhism. To become free from desire by process of meditation and living a life in goodness. So the frame, the incubation chamber is a life of goodness, compassion, nonviolence, etc., charity, Chinese people are very charitable. The incubation chamber of goodness and do meditation. You know the phrase that's very popular these days in America, in Europe also, is mindfulness. It's a Buddhist phrase. Be in the moment. In my college days, it was Be Here Now. It was a book. Be Here Now. Popular book. Richard Alpert, professor from Harvard University, wrote a book, Be Here Now. It was about don't worry about the past, don't live in the future. All there is, it's a teaching of Buddhism. Kshanik Vada Buddhism. Kshanik means just a moment. Vada is doctrine. The doctrine of all there is the moment. The one that's gone is gone. The one that hasn't happened. All there is the moment, and then it's gone. So what's the goal of being in the moment? Or being mindful? Listen carefully. It's to get on the other side of the moment. When you're really good at it, you become really good at meditation. You're really in the moment. You go beyond the moment. What's there? Nirvana. What's nirvana? Nothing. Nirvana, cessation, the literal, it's a Sanskrit term, cessation of material existence. When material existence ceases, there's no desire and there's no suffering. You want to become free from suffering? Enter nirvana. How do you do that? Same method mentioned. Now here's the Vedic picture. You ready? The root cause of suffering is ignorance. Ignorance covers desire, because desire is of the soul, and then you get ignorant desire. And from ignorant desire, you get ignorant activity. From ignorant activity, you get suffering. So the way to eliminate suffering is to eliminate ignorance. And how do you eliminate ignorance? Sort of knowledge. It was the previous one, that sword at the bottom. And then you have the greatest happiness. So, dear college students and dear professionals and those of you that have children and grandchildren and you have compassion in your heart, help people come to this stage of greatest happiness, where there's freedom from such desire. You have to replace it with something else, because desire is of the soul. You have to have desire in relation to the Supreme Soul. And then you have to know what the Supreme Soul is. Here's a few more verses. This is Bhagavad Gita. Remember, I'm speaking like this to college kids. They want to know, how do I become, why is life difficult, and how do I find happiness? Bhagavad Gita. A liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in a trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme, with a capital S. That's chapter 5. Here's chapter 6. See the self by the pure mind and relish and rejoice in the self. That's the person who's seeing the self within. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses, established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty called life. Why is life difficult? Even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from miseries arising from material contact. It's not the material contact per se, it's the mood of trying to be the enjoyer of that material contact. Samsparshaja bhoga. Bhagavad Gita. The problem is, people have, minus that sense of connection with the Supreme, there's whatever they see is meant for enjoyment. And it leads to disruption of nature, everything is in disharmony. And then for that abuse of nature and disharmony, there's a reaction from Mother Nature in the form of problems and difficulties that escalate, as we see going on in the world. This discussion was on April 22nd with the college students in the Boston area. It was Earth Day, so that's why this image is there. But, respecting Earth and our place in it, because according to Ishopanishad, the Earth and everything is owned and controlled by God. Isavasya idam sarvam. Some of you may know that verse, first verse of Ishopanishad. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitaha magridaha krishusvidanam. This earth is, and its bounty is arranged by God, Isha, and each one of us has our necessities being provided, and we're to accept them, knowing well that it's the property of Isha, and other things than what we require is not our property, it's Isha's property, and we respect it. It is meant for the maintenance of other people. And so compassion and charity is an essential part of culture. Civilized people are compassionate and charitable. It's culture. Cultured people are compassionate and charitable. And those that are too much covered by Maya, they're in this other department, in the greed department. It's insatiable. Dushparena. Analena cha. Anala. Like fire. Never satisfied. Burns like fire. Greed. And the other shortcomings of material contact, where the idea is to be the enjoyer of it. So how do you get rid of that? It's a stain. It's embedded. It's ingrained in our psyche for who knows how many lifetimes. What's the cure? The cure is sound vibration from a proper source, because there's always sound from some source. The proper source, sound vibration elevates it. It's the principle of the Vedas, Shruti, that which is to be heard. And the simplest form of that sound vibration is this Maha Mantra that everyone can participate in. Children that don't know anything about anything, people in China that don't know anything about anything, can hear the Maha Mantra and have their heart moved. They don't know what it is. They want to know what it is. It's and any age, any stage, any culture, any socioeconomic, that there's no material prerequisite or disqualifier. Just have to be a spirit soul. That's pretty much all of us. And then the sound vibration. And thus that's where Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam fit. Because along with the chanting of the holy name, it gives direction to life. How are we to live in accord with codes that are meant for our welfare? This prescription from the physician. Here's the medicine, here's the diet, here's how you should follow. That's the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. How to conduct the affairs of life when the heart is made clean. So it doesn't become fanaticism or some blind sentiment. So a wholesome life. So that's now back to our first slide, and that's it for this evening. Why is life difficult, and how do I learn to be happy? So if you like what you heard, you can give her some credit, and if you don't like, you can give her some blame. Tell her later, though. I was in Houston this past Sunday, and somehow they wanted this topic, so that's what I did, as far as I can remember. So, any thoughts you'd like to share, or comments or questions or complaints? Yeah. We have some online people, so we'll pass around this microphone.
Swamiji, thank you for coming. And my question is this: on Krishna consciousness path, there is definitely, you get spiritual happiness after practicing for many years, but it doesn't happen till you transcend to samadhi stage.
No, it happens gradually, progressively, like the rising of the sun.
So even before you reach the
Oh,
stage
yes.
of samadhi, you,
Oh, yes. Chaita Marjanam, from the very beginning. The Chaita, consciousness, becomes cleansed. And as consciousness becomes cleansed, there's light. And as light, then there's happiness. It's gradual, like the rising of the sun.
yeah, I didn't know that. I thought unless
No,
you reach to.
No. It's not like a on and off switch.
Okay.
It's more like a dimmer switch.
My second question is that if you're you're on sattvic mode, that means no anger, lust, or any kind of greed, and you do selfless service of others. Since God, Krishna is there in everybody's heart as Paramatma, isn't that considered bhakti or just
Yes.
good karma?
Well, it can be karma yoga. It's not yet bhakti yoga.
No, but it's service to
You
the
want to know
God
the
or no?
distinction?
Or it's just good karma?
It depends. It depends on where. Everything depends upon consciousness.
No, I'm just saying selfless love for
But
people.
let's drill on the word selfless. If I think I'm this body, if that's the concept that I'm carrying, and most people have such a concept, selfless service, an extension of that selfless service is mode of goodness, happiness, is I feel a sense of contentment. Everyone knows what that sense of contentment feels like. You go out of your way, do something for other people, and you feel something. And you dedicate your life in that way, and you feel something. According to Bhagavad Gita, that's a conditioning of the mode of goodness. It's not transcendence. It's the mode of goodness. But mode of goodness is good, but it's not transcendence. And so selfless work has a selfishness, unless it's beyond the bodily conception, or unless it's into the realm of spiritual conception. So it's the dimmer switch. One is moving in the direction of light, but the light's not fully bright yet. And with that dimmer switch moving up, there's less attachment to the fruits of work, karma phala. And then there's sometimes people do selfless work and they have an expectation what's going to come. You know that one.
I know, I'm just talking about total selfless.
But, okay, then, so just to go forward with your question, there's nishkam karma yoga, where I'm doing my work and I'm not thinking what's in it, what's the fruit going to be, and how might I deploy that fruit in such a way it will bring happiness to me and mine, my family, my circle, my community, or whatever it is, circle. If it's so, the fruit then has to go somewhere. And that's where karma yoga is. It goes to Krishna. And bhakti isn't just thinking about the fruit goes to Krishna. It's attachment to Krishna.
But Krishna is there in everybody's heart as Paramatma.
But we forget him. That's the conditioning.
Okay.
That's the Maya picture. She's got us covered.
Okay.
So selfless service, my point in response to your question is, selfless service has its gradations, layers of, it's not really selfless, it's actually, there's a mix. Largely selfless, but selfish. Unless, so now the happiness, I can feel a happiness in selfless service, even if it's mixed. Less mixed than some other people, but still, there's the what's in it for me consciousness. It's there unless the connection with this is being offered to Krishna is the consciousness. And it's gradual. Awakening of that consciousness is Krishna consciousness.
Thank you.
Okay. Nice question. I like your question. We have a room full of intelligent people. I'm sure there's some thoughtful questions here.
Okay, Maharaji, namaskar. My question is, we are living in the material world. Mostly, I will say, like 99% of the public in the world are enjoying the life as in the material world, taking care of the family and all
Yes.
these things.
Yes.
Now, in what way Lord Krishna's preaching or Lord Rama's preaching can help us to increase our awareness or the happiness in our own life? Because we cannot get away from our material life. We're going to stay in this life. Okay. So that's what I want to know is what kind of consciousness of the Lord Krishna's or Lord Rama's can help us to improve our own material life going on.
Well, that sword metaphor is very appropriate. Many swords have two edges. One is attachment and the other is detachment. So detachment doesn't mean trash it, doesn't mean I don't care. It means recognizing there's another purpose for the material. The purpose for the material, the purpose for creation is it's God's energy meant for God's service. So we can move through the material energy, that's the attachment side. We can move through the material energy with a different purpose, the attachment, the mission of human life. Lower life forms, other than human life forms, you can't have this discussion with them. They can't be trained. But humans can be trained to direct consciousness to transcendence, even while moving through the temporary, through the material world. So it doesn't mean discarding. That a false sense of renunciation is giving it a bad name and throwing it. There's verses in Sanskrit which I could say, but false renunciation, palgu vairagya, is that which is Hari Sambandha, that which has relationship with Hari, just throwing it away and turning your back on it. That's false renunciation. Palgu vairagya. Rather, detachment or renunciation is to see those things in relation to God. I'm trying to be responsive to your question. Seeing those things in relation to God and using them in service to God. You connect your senses with the object of the senses in service to the master of the senses. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Training like that is how to move in the world and not be caught in the cycle of bondage of birth and death, because that's the path of spiritual perfection. And that there's a way to do that, a way to train it and a way to live it. And so at any age, one can learn. It's easier at the younger ages, but in principle, the bamboo is more flexible when it's young than when it's old. But the principle doesn't change with age. It's recognizing this Ishopanishad verse number 1. Isavasham idam. This idam, this jagat is belonging to God, Isha. And move about it in that sense. Engage the senses with object of the senses. In the mood of bhaj, in the mood of pleasing. That's what bhakti, the dhatu for bhakti is bhaj. Using in practical activity, using the object of the senses in service to the master of the senses with love. learning that art. And it has to start from the inside, from at the heart level. We can practice something on the outside level, rituals like we was discussing this nice. It was yesterday. A nice lady was speaking about people come to temples and do rituals, and that's it. And there's something more than that's it. So it's not we discard the externals, but it's at the heart level. That's where bhakti, how to move the heart. And my statement here has been sound vibration. Spiritual sound vibration has that effect. Moves the heart. And regularly, satatam kirtayanto mam yatantas shadritarvata. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says. Satatam. Regularly. Yeah. We're busy people. Like this doctor that I spoke with today, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, even on the weekends. There's no rest for the weary. But he has time for God. And that's what sustains him spiritually, and that's what makes him impactful in the lives of others spiritually. Because making that God connection through sound. Primarily, starting with sound, and then other things. You gotta hit the button.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is a basic question, but it comes up whenever we are discussing, like right now I'm discussing the second chapter with my group of some of the people who are interested.
15th chapter Bhagavad Gita?
Second chapter.
Third chapter. Second chapter Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. Where Krishna says that we have to tolerate the happiness or sadness, because it's like the seasons that comes.
Yes.
So they are able to comprehend, or they are able to understand we need to tolerate the tough time. But it's hard for them to comprehend that why do we have to tolerate even the happiness?
Okay. That's it? That's the question?
So how can we make it easy for...
Well, it comes back to, how do I learn to be happy? What is happiness? And the answer is, happiness is of the soul. So the tolerate of the happiness, sukha dukkha, that's not of the soul. The pleasure or displeasure of senses coming in contact with sense objects, pleasure, displeasure. You get drawn to the pleasure, and you're involved in duality. And then in the next moment, the pleasure becomes, it's the opposite. So don't go there into the temporary. Stay in the realm of the eternal. Withdraw from the temporary and invest in the eternal. No. Doesn't mean you check out of the temporary. It's just that the standard of what happiness is or isn't is not in terms of the temporary. The temporary is moving, and you're responsible, and you move through the temporary, recognizing this is part of my life. That pyramid structure, the body, mind, and intelligence, and I'm engaging myself with the temporary. But it's not the standard of happiness. So be a little... In this same Uddhava Gita section of the Bhagavatam, there's a nice verse where Krishna says, a candidate for bhakti is one who is neither too attached nor too detached. And the too attached, that's easy to understand. And the too detached means you become impersonal, you become numb. So it's not, we have a body, we have a mind, and we want to feel, some balance with the body and the mind. So a balanced position, don't have too much affinity for the happiness part, because it'll draw you into the unhappiness part. You recognize what's what. I mean, the temperature now is really nice. Yesterday was pretty cold. Anyway, so so you dress differently because it's pretty cold, and so on. We respond in a responsible way according to the world around us, but it's not the standard of what our happiness is. Wait a while, and that's going to change. It's the nature of the world. The verse that I quoted, you can take a look at that verse. Ye hi samsparsha ja boga. Second chapter. Dukkha yonaya evate. Satrup will help you find the verse. Then you can explain that to your group. Look for sukha, you find dukkha. Okay. Anyone else want to share something? Yes.
So you talk about the sound. Right?
Sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I'm doing the bhajan quietly with some concentration,
Good.
how would you separate that or compare it to and chanting loudly?
There's a nice discussion on this topic by Haridas. Haridas, without details, he was questioned, why do you chant loudly instead of silently? And he said, both are beneficial, but when there's chanting aloud, then other living entities will also hear, and they will benefit also. And so that's better. The compassion factor, sound is better. So who knows what living entities are in the air and on the ground and trees and plants and whatever. It's beneficial, that sound is beneficial for them. Second reason is it helps capture the mind. Sound, audible, helps capture the mind compared to silent within the mind. Now, there are mantras that are meant to be chanted within the mind, Gayatri mantra in particular. But sound vibration helps capture the mind. Here's a nice teaching I like. You know who is Prabhupada? So Prabhupada's spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, taught like this. Distracted chanting is a common experience. The mind likes to wander here and there. But one of the best ways to conquer the mind is through sound. Because when the ear is hearing the sound, the ear hearing the sound can conquer the mind. The mind becomes conquered. The mind becomes still. And so the mind likes to rule, but the mind can be conquered by the ear, and then there's no more quibbling. When you're hearing, the mind is conquered. Same way of saying the same thing. It helps control the mind or capture the mind. And when there's continuous sound and you're actually hearing the sound, that's samadhi. I mean, that was his question. The stage of samadhi. There's different ways to reach samadhi besides this method through sound. The method through sound is more effective, more swift, more direct, more effective. Okay. We have some online questions. Should we do that? Sure.
This is from Radha Kunja Bihari Prabhu. My understanding is that ignorance is covering knowledge. Does this imply ignorance is more powerful than knowledge, forcing the living entity to undergo the purification process?
No. It just means using a comparison to understand the thing. The sun is in the sky. The brightness of the sun is not diminished by clouds. Our experience of the brightness of the sun is diminished. Say it again. Knowledge is not diminished by ignorance. Knowledge is knowledge, like the sun. But our experience of Krishna, or experience of that natural innate knowledge that's within every living entity, may be covered by the clouds of ignorance. It's not more powerful then, just it diminishes our experience of. That's it. Okay. Well, it looks like we're ready to wrap up. Thank you very much. I hope you liked the class, loving the topic. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.